Hello everyone, this is the Bitcoin Libertarian. Our guest today is Alexandre Laizet. Alexander is the CEO of the Blockchain Group, Europeans' first Bitcoin treasury company. Alexandre has been making waves in the financial world, leading his company to a remarkable 530% stock performance in just 6 months, outpacing even Bitcoin's own gains. With a bold strategy and redefined corporate treasury management, the Blockchain Group holds over 620 Bitcoin and has achieved a staggering 709.8% Bitcoin yield year to date. Today, we will talk about his insights on why Bitcoin is poised to become the world's reserve of value and how his company is capitalizing on this transformative asset. Alexandre, welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you and look forward to the conversation.
Excellent. And let's go forward to the first question. The first question that I do to everyone is, Alexandre, how were you orange pilled?
Oh, I was orange pilled with COVID happening and with the total loss of freedom over in Europe and I guess the world with the governments that wanted to impose a lot of restrictions. And I discovered that without financial sovereignty, you don't have sovereignty at all. And so it was back in 2020 when I discovered Bitcoin. And at the time, I used to work with half of the largest corporate treasurers in France. And at the same time, Strategy was launching its Bitcoin treasury company Strategy. And so the difference was completely astounding because the corporate treasurers I was working with were completely wasting shareholder value by allocating capital to monetary funds that were yielding negative rates. And at the same time, Strategy was leading the way in the world with Bitcoin, adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet and creating shareholder value. And so with this, I decided to transition into the adoption of Bitcoin for institutions. And that's where I worked with Accenture, with 30 plus financial institutions. And there, after this, I joined the Blockchain Group to build Europe's first Bitcoin treasury company. But yeah, the orange pilling, I would say that someone that is really important in my process back in 2020 was Parker Lewis. And it's his series on every type of questions that someone can have on Bitcoin at the very beginning. I think that all the major podcasts, Peter McCormack, Preston Pish, and so on, at the time were very structural for me. And then I read a lot of books. I listened to, I think, 4 hours of Bitcoin podcast every day since. And I think, yeah, it's now thousands and thousands of hours dedicated to Bitcoin. And I'm very happy to be fully focused on Bitcoin on my work as well as the personal life.
Excellent. Yes, I think that many of us were orange pilled by 2020 during the COVID. Even though I knew Bitcoin from before, I went fully orange pilled with the Sailor series with Robert Breedlove. I think that everyone, we discovered that the freedoms were taken and we had a lot of free time and we went there. And when you enter to the rabbit hole, you start finding a lot of different rabbit holes and you can go out.
Exactly.
So let's go to the strategy of the Blockchain Group. The Blockchain Group is Europeans' first Bitcoin treasury company. Can you walk us through what inspired this bold pivot to be a Bitcoin-centric treasury strategy?
Well, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, and so I wouldn't have done anything else because I believe that's the most accretive thing I can do in life. It's to run a Bitcoin treasury company that is focused on increasing Bitcoin per share over time. How did this happen? Well, the Blockchain Group has had multiple lives, and it's gone through a major restructuring back in December 2023, where it liquidated and sold all subsidiaries that were not profitable, and specifically one that were specialized in Web3 that was not profitable, and so it was liquidated. And that's why I joined. I joined because the Blockchain Group at mid last year, they had 2 operating companies that were profitable in data analytics, AI, business intelligence, and web development, plus this capacity to do a Bitcoin treasury company on public market, which was extremely important in my view. And so the board, when I met them, we were introduced by a common person that I was working with and they were working with, a lawyer in Paris, and I would like to thank him again. And so I was working with the banks at the time on how to adopt Bitcoin, custody capabilities, trading capabilities, and even tokenization capabilities. And we were introduced, and the board asked me 2 questions. They asked me, I asked the board 2 questions. Is it about Bitcoin only? And they told me yes. I said, okay, we can continue the conversation. And I asked, is it about the MSTR playbook, the strategy playbook only, or is it about something more complex? And they told me, no, it's about the strategy playbook. And I said, okay, let's do it. And I've built a strategic plan for the company to adopt a Bitcoin standard and to move very fast on the accumulation of Bitcoin. And now it's 6 months, and we have achieved 800% performance over 6 months and 2 weeks now. It was 500% 2 weeks ago. And we are accelerating significantly because we have strategic shareholders like Tobam, a French 2 billion asset manager since the very beginning. We have Adam Back, the only person mentioned in the white paper, and the CEO of Blockstream, who is, of course, a Bitcoin legend and has been with us since the beginning as well. We have in the board Ludovic Chochin-Laurent, who is also the co-founder of Capital Union Bank, the largest bank in the Bahamas. And so you can see that it seems simple because the playbook is simple. It is to raise capital, accumulate Bitcoin in ways that are accretive for shareholders to increase Bitcoin per share. Never sell the Bitcoin, never lose the Bitcoin. That is the whole strategy, to hold the Bitcoin forever. But a lot of people get confused and they want to do something more complex. But in fact, the best and the most accretive strategy is to focus on accelerating the playbook that works. And the playbook that works is the MSTR playbook. And that's why Metaplanet has seen huge success in Japan and the world. And that's why, as well, we've seen massive demand from Europe and now the US and the world as well. At this point, a Bitcoin treasury company is a global, international, cross-border company. And people, they just want to see if the playbook is correct. The management team is laser eyes focused on Bitcoin per share increase over time. And then investors measure the success of Bitcoin treasury companies based on their capacity to increase BTC yield. And so that's how it happened, and that's how we are operating. And right now, we are accelerating as well our capacity to communicate more and to give more perspective to shareholders, like the dashboards that strategy has done, and so on. So that's where we are. And we have asked for the authorizations on June 10th to have the capacity, with the approval of the General Assembly, to raise up to 10 billion euros to accelerate our Bitcoin treasury company strategy.
Excellent. And I want to talk about Adam Back because there was some news that came in this week that he was going to invest in the company, 30 million euros. And how was the contact? You contact them, they contact you, because I was listening today the space, and as you said, Adam Back is a legend, is a true legend. I have the opportunity to listen to him in Riga in the Honey Budget in 2023, and it's amazing. He said that Bitcoin was gonna reach 100K before the halving, when Bitcoin was around 20K, and he was not far away. So how was the approach to Adam Back?
So I used to know Adam from my time at Accenture, where I used to work with systemic banks on their digital asset custody and payments and tokenization strategy. And I used to introduce Bitcoin companies to those banks. And so I was quite connected to the Bitcoin ecosystem here in Europe, and the banks. And so that's how I got connected with the Blockstream team, and I used to talk at Bitcoin conferences and do some panels with Adam in Lugano Plan B. And so we through this, and of course it was as well related to the tokenization capability of the liquid layer 2 that has been very well contributed by Blockstream with tokenization on top of Bitcoin, with financial instruments that can be issued on top of the liquid sidechain. And so with Stoker, for example, in Luxembourg. And so, of course, that was of major interest for systemic banks. And that's how we got connected. And the decision I made to join ALTBG, that's the ticker of the company, it's been made when I was back in Lugano Plan B, in a panel with Adam, Back, Paolo Ardolino, Yves Chefati, that I made this decision to join. And yeah, that was the best decision that I could make. And I'm very honored to have Adam on board with us since the beginning.
And what is the sensation to work together with such a legend that some people believe that he's Satoshi?
Look, nobody knows who is Satoshi, and it doesn't matter because Bitcoin is the most decentralized and secure network in the world. But the sensation you get by working with Adam is that you are literally discussing and working and thinking with one of the best minds on planet Earth, with really next level type capability of thinking through so many factors and so many conditions for success. And I think that's extremely valuable to be able to discuss and go through thoughts and ideas with Adam and his experience that is about like now 30 years in Bitcoin related things, from development to financial applications and all the funds that Blockstream is launching as well, and the different technical applications, and even from an investment perspective. I mean, Adam is one of the most brilliant investors out there every day on X and in various platforms, and one of the most well-connected person in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so I think that every time I talk with Adam, it's a massive pleasure and honor, and you just learn things every day with Adam. So it's always a pleasure.
And one of the things that I noticed from him, because I have a small, I remember when I was waiting for my plane, I was flying to Frankfurt and then to Hong Kong, and Adam appeared. We were drinking a coffee with my friend, and Adam appeared in the middle, like buying a coffee. And I say, and he was with the same like backpack and the same T-shirt, the same shirt. And I said, look at this guy. He's a legend. And look at what humble he is. He's not in the lunch. He's just drinking coffee like every pleb. And that amazed me when I saw him. And the other day I comment something on X that he has the same, if you don't have the same T-shirt, shirt from like 2 years ago, you're not bullish enough. So that's and he said of course. So I like this point. But let's keep moving forward with the company. So how do you think over the past 6 months the blockchain group outpaced even Bitcoin and the fiat major index? How do you see that the Bitcoin strategy differentiates your company than any other public traded company?
Well, traditional companies, they are mainly valued based on their cash flows only. And so those companies, if they have a bad quarter, they can literally lose the massive part of their valuations. And so for decades and decades, companies have thought that the best way to create shareholder value was to only focus on the P&L and to give away the money instead of capitalizing on it on the balance sheet. And that was before there was no solution really for those corporate treasurers to capitalize on an asset on the balance sheet that would appreciate over time. And that solution has come with Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin, what happens is that if you put that on your balance sheet, you are energizing your company. You are putting fuel on fire because that's what you can do as a company, is to use the elasticity of capital markets and financial instrument issuance to acquire the most inelastic asset on earth, and in that way to increase Bitcoin per share. And so sometimes you see companies that go up in a skyrocketing manner, but it's only based on future expectations. And for Bitcoin treasury companies, it's extremely different. They can go up in a skyrocketing manner as well, but it's based on the money they have on the balance sheet. It's based on the Bitcoin, on the digital capital, on the more scarce assets on earth that exist and that can only appreciate if it remains decentralized and secure, as fiat currencies are just unlimited in supply. And so what you can see is that our performance is massive. I mean, we have done 800+% in 6 months. We are the #1 publicly traded stock in Paris out of all stocks traded in Paris in terms of performance over 6 months since the launch of our strategy. And that is because of our capacity to generate record BTC yield. On year to date, we have generated 709% BTC yield. And so that means that for shareholders that entered at the beginning of the strategy and at the beginning of the year, we have increased their number of Bitcoin per fully diluted share by 8x. And so what you can see is that even Bitcoin treasury companies, they do have a premium on top of the net asset value of the Bitcoin, but that premium is justified by the capacity of the company to generate increase of Bitcoin per share. And so what you can see, and what Adam has shown as a new indicator to follow, is the months to MNAV. And so that's the number of months that a company needs to cover the premium of the market capitalization versus the net asset value of the Bitcoin. What this means is that it's the time that the company will take to get you back to the equivalent of 1 Bitcoin that you would have invested directly versus invested in the company when there is a premium. And then over this break-even point where you get back to the initial amount of Bitcoin you would have gotten on a direct investment, well, the Bitcoin treasury company is able to generate you a literal yield in Bitcoin terms and on the number of Bitcoin per share. And so that means that you can start at 0.5 Bitcoin per share, but you can end up at 5 Bitcoin per share. And so that's something that is really not available in the market elsewhere without margin call risk. And so Bitcoin treasury companies are effectively levered Bitcoin without margin call risk and without even needing for the company itself to take leverage. And that's something that is missed a little bit because a lot of people look at strategy that has done a lot of convertible debt, but they completely forget about the fact that strategy is one of the less levered companies. I mean, it's just 20 or 30% of the value of their Bitcoin that they have acquired through convertible debt. And so what you can see is that, in fact, Bitcoin treasury companies are the most conservative companies on planet Earth if you believe in Bitcoin. Of course, if you believe that Bitcoin is going to zero, well, you shouldn't invest in Bitcoin treasury companies. But if you are bullish on Bitcoin, you should definitely be bullish on Bitcoin treasury companies And if you are bullish on Bitcoin treasury companies, well, early stage Bitcoin treasury companies that are laser eyes focused on the simple and effectively the best playbook of strategy, I think that you can be bullish as well on early stage Bitcoin treasury company. So I think that explains, I think that explains the performance of Bitcoin treasury companies overall, and I think that explains as well the overperformance of Bitcoin treasury companies that are really focused on increasing Bitcoin per share, that are really focused as their core business model to be a Bitcoin treasury company, to have a dedicated team, a dedicated person. That's the only thing I do every day. I am 121% focused on Bitcoin per share increase over time. That's the only thing I focus every day for our shareholders. And I think that if you are not focused on this, you lose opportunities and you cannot achieve the same results as the companies that are fully focused on increasing Bitcoin per share.
Yes, and talking about the increase of Bitcoin per share, what instruments the company is using to get more money, to get more Bitcoin?
So we have various tools and instruments that are providing effectively the equivalent capabilities that strategy can have in the US in different formats. So to date, we have been authorized and we have started to do private placements in equity at premiums to reference stock price of the stock on a 20-day moving average. And we have also used BTC denominated convertible debt, which is an innovation. It was the first one worldwide to do for a Bitcoin treasury company, was that we directly took Bitcoin as subscriptions directly, and the debt is denominated in Bitcoin. Well, from a theoretical perspective, you would prefer your debt to be denominated in fiat and your assets in Bitcoin. But in our situation, it was more effective to increase Bitcoin per share when we had 40 Bitcoin on the balance sheet to increase significantly to 620 Bitcoin on the balance sheet by taking a BTC denominated convertible debt, because the debt and the assets are denominated in Bitcoin, and so we have no credit risk on the operation. If we would have done a fiat convertible debt, we would have only be limited to 20-30% of 40 Bitcoin, which is nothing. And so, of course, the most accretive strategy was to use the Bitcoin denominated convertible debt. And that protects a lot the company as well, because for the last 2 years, it's a 5-year term. And so for the last 2 years, the company has the capacity to convert the convertible debt into shares of the company to be able to just keep the assets and issue new shares of the company. And so the investors of this BTC denominated convertible debt are already in the money, meaning that we have already reached, just 2 months after the issuance, the strike prices that were at premiums to the stock price that are necessary to convert into the shares of the company. And so in a conservative assumption, unless Bitcoin fails completely, it is extremely probable that there will be no repayment of the debt and that everything will be repaid in shares, as it was, of course, the objective for every party involved, from the investors and the company. And so that was a major innovation, and that we still have available. I mean, when there are investors that are interested to allocate in a Bitcoin denominated financial instrument to get a form of best of between Bitcoin and a Bitcoin treasury company, this instrument is still possible. We have an SPV in Luxembourg that is ring-fenced from the group, from the financial instrument perspective, and that allows for a very unique possibility for investors to have a form of levered exposure on Bitcoin without margin call risk, and with a form of downside protection and like a protection on the failure of a company, which is, of course, a risk that still exists, as always, as it is an operating company. And so that was a major operation we did back in March. And in the meantime, we have also started a program of stock acquisition rights for all shareholders to participate in the Bitcoin accumulation strategy. At the time, we were limited to about 7 to 8 million, so it's not extremely significant in terms of amounts. Today, we have about 60 million euros Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So it's not that significant, but it was very important to give the possibility for all shareholders to benefit from the same price of the converts that we issued in March, and to give the capacity of all shareholders as well to buy those stock acquisition rights options in the market. And so they are trading, and they've done fantastic performance as well with a separate ticker. And so that has added a lot of volatility, a lot of liquidity. I mean, our liquidity has been multiplied over the last 6 months by 10 to 20x. And so you see that Bitcoin is really a firepower into the company that is adding a lot of capacity and new capacity for the company to raise more capital and accumulate more Bitcoin. And so what we have been authorized but have not yet leveraged is public offerings. So public offerings to raise capital, any type of financial instrument, but not only with private placement way, with specific professional investors, but with the whole public, the whole shareholder base. And so that's, of course, a massive opportunity for the company. And also what we have been authorized but have not yet leveraged is fiat convertible bonds. But I think that's more of a last step when we have a more sizable balance sheet with Bitcoin that we can really leverage. But we have already been approached by a lot of banks that want to work with us on all of these topics. Very important milestone for us is also June 10th, when we have the vote of the General Assembly to give us the authorization to go from 300 million to 10 billion of authorization for capital increases, which will enable us to really have the capacity to scale the Bitcoin accumulation strategy.
Interesting. And I think that same as Sailor and same as strategy, you may face some critics from the analysts, of the traditional analysts. How do you deal with it?
Critics, yes, but in fact, less and less. I think the analysts now that you have seen the huge success of strategy, the huge success of MetaPlanet, the huge success of all the different Bitcoin treasury companies that are emerging, I think analysts start now to have more questions instead of critics. And I think that you start to have a lot more shareholders as well of Bitcoin treasury companies in the world, which in fact is of course changing the perspectives of the different analysts, because some of them, they have started to be allocated to Bitcoin treasury companies. And so I think that the perspective is really changing, even from a media perspective. I mean, the difference with traditional market is night and day. In traditional capital markets over in Europe, there is very few capital increases because the processes are very long, because the upside is not that clear, because of many and thousands of factors of risk for typical operational companies. And on our side, we are just accelerating, and the playbook is simple, and the investors are subscribing to capital increases. And so what you can see is that there is a huge difference. And I think it's like the same difference between a company that is operating without the internet and a company that has adopted AI and the internet. It's just moving at a different scale. And the journalists, they cannot even keep up with the Bitcoin treasury companies. They are not even up to date, and they literally give synthesis of what is happening on X. And the real media now is social platforms, and you and the different podcasters and the different independent analysts. And then you see that traditional media is just trying to keep up but they will really need to adapt and as well to adopt Bitcoin on their own balance sheet if they want to survive.
Yes, I think that the point is that the traditional analysts from traditional media, they try to analyze these new companies, the Bitcoin treasury companies, with the old playbook. And you cannot analyze these kind of companies if you don't understand Bitcoin. Because to understand these companies, first, you need to understand Bitcoin. You need to do your 100, 1,000 hours of research. You need to have invest in Bitcoin and then do the research on the Bitcoin treasury company. And also, I think that many of your colleagues might ask you about that. Do you see a trend in other European companies trying to copy the playbook of the blockchain group?
Yes, I see a lot of new companies that are starting to add Bitcoin on their balance sheet or do Bitcoin-related activities, but 99% of companies and executives will not be able to forget about their ego. I mean, that's why I love the name of the fund of Jeff Booth, Ego Dev Capital. I mean, this name is really spot on. I mean, you have to understand that to make something better than Bitcoin, you need to make something simpler. And in reality, you realize that if you try to take something out of Bitcoin, it doesn't work. And so Bitcoin is already the best solution because there is nothing else left to take away. And so it's quite the same for Bitcoin treasury companies. To make a Bitcoin treasury company better, you don't have to make it more complex. You don't have to add thousands and thousands of new activities with new complexities. No, you have to potentially make it simpler, easier access, faster capital raising, faster Bitcoin accumulation. That's how you make a Bitcoin treasury company better. That's how you build a Bitcoin accumulation machine. And I think that Metaplanet has shown how they have been able in Japan to build this Bitcoin accumulation machine, and huge shout outs to them. I think that strategy has shown that they have been able to issue specific financial instruments for specific investors in the most efficient way. And I think that's the example, and that's the playbook that works. And that's what we are following the steps of at AELTBG. It's to focus on the implementation of the strategy playbook. And you know, the guidance is simple. It's to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, as fast as possible, in the most accretive way as possible. And so any other activity is a distraction. And that's what 99% of executives, unfortunately, will not understand. And they will try to differentiate, and they will try to launch a new product and a new offering that is not contributing to the BTC per share as much as they could have raised capital to increase efficiently with an efficient financial product, the Bitcoin per share. And so, of course, we will keep open to how the market evolves, how the strategy playbook evolves, and how strategy Metaplanet is moving. And of course, the opportunities we have at European and global scale level. But the real playbook and the right playbook and the best playbook is the strategy playbook. And that's where all of our team's energy is focused. And so, yeah, there is a rise of Bitcoin treasury companies, but I think the real name for Bitcoin treasury company is the Bitcoin treasury company that is focused on BTC per share increase.
Yes, that's the point. That's the simple thing. I remember I saw my friend, my business partner explained me about that like 1.5 years ago with the strategy playbook. Like the most important thing was the BTC per share. And if you understand this, then it's super simple. But to reach to that level, again, you need to study Bitcoin, you need to study the strategy playbook, and not too many people have done yet. And let's move to something that I want to ask. In a recent paper by French asset manager TOBAM, highlight your BTC yield strategy, breaking it down into three factors: BTC yield, BTC performance, and BTC premium. Can you explain these components in simple terms to the audience?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Well, this paper is a mathematical paper from Tobam, the 2 billion asset manager led by Yves Schefati, who is one of the Bitcoin OGs in France that is really important for the French adoption of Bitcoin at the institutional scale, because Tobam has launched the first Bitcoin open-ended fund at the time in France in 2017. And so they've been really leading the way, and they are the team of mathematicians and specialists in the topic. And they have published this paper showing that the performance of Bitcoin treasury companies is not about magic, and it's not about leverage, and it's about the valuation that you can make based on those three factors. And the first one, as you said, is the BTC yield, which is the increase of Bitcoin per fully diluted share over time. In simple terms, it is the capacity to increase faster the number of Bitcoin on the balance sheet than the number of shares. To give you an example, in March, we had 40 Bitcoin and about 90 million shares. That was before the operation that I described earlier on. After the operation, we had 620 Bitcoin and 180 million shares, about this. And so that's a 2x increase in the number of shares at the same time that we increased by 15x the number of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And that's how you get about 700% BTC yield. It's the difference between the 15x, but minus the difference, you have to halve that to take into account that half of it is related to a dilution of the share. And so what happened for shareholders is that before the operation, they had about 40 sats per share, the lowest unit of Bitcoin, the sat. So they had about 40 sats per share. And after the operation, they had 330 plus sats per share. And so that's a massive increase in shareholder value. The second factor is the BTC performance, the BTC exposure. That's, of course, the performance of Bitcoin denominated in fiat, in euro, in dollars. The Bitcoin that the company has on the balance sheet, of course, can appreciate over time. And so that's the second factor. And the third one is the BTC Premium. The BTC Premium is the ratio of the difference between the market cap and the net asset value of the Bitcoin. Imagine that you have 100 million market cap and you have 50 million on the balance sheet. That's a 2x BTC Premium. If you have a fully diluted market cap, meaning taking into account the shares that have to be issued but that have not been issued yet, and you have, imagine, 200 million market cap, fully diluted, and you have 50 million Bitcoin on the balance sheet, that's a 4x BTC Premium. And so when you are an investor and you look at the Bitcoin treasury companies, you have to look at these three factors to analyze the point of entry in terms of if you want to analyze potential return on investment and these kind of things. You have to see those three factors as complementary and they interact between each other. So for example, back in January, you could have on ALTBG a BTC premium of 4 to 5x, but at the same time in March, we did a BTC increase of BTC per share, a BTC yield increase of 8x. And so even if you paid a premium of 4x, 2 months later, we were able to generate an 8x BTC per share increase. And so you see that we recovered the premium and we exceeded it on top of it. And so that's, of course, extremely valuable for investors. And that's why Adam Back talks about this month to MNAV. MNAV, it's similar. It's as well calculating the premium on top of the the net asset value. And so you see that the importance is how fast is the company to generate a BTC yield that will recover the premium and that will exceed the premium. And of course, any investor can make its own assumptions based on the Bitcoin price evolution perspectives, based on the current stock price, based on the capacity of the company to generate BTC yield, and based on the current premiums at the market. And so what you can see as well is that early stage Bitcoin treasury companies tend to have a higher premium because they start from a lower amount of Bitcoin, and so it's easier to generate fast, extremely high BTC yield. And on the other side, very mature Bitcoin treasury companies, of course, for example, Strategy, even if they have 1.5 to 2x premium, that means that it's billions and billions of dollars of capacity to raise capital in accretive ways. And so it's like it doesn't really matter whether you are at the exact same level in terms of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. What matters is also the capacity to really go fast and aggressive on the number of Bitcoin per share increase. That is materialized in the BTC yield. And of course, the capacity of the company to increase BTC yield will affect the premium, and the Bitcoin price will affect as well the capacity to raise capital and to see the effect as well, of course, in the BTC premium. And so the BTC premium will also affect the capacity to generate BTC yield. And those are really the three factors that you have to analyze as an investor. And Tobam has shown for Strategy specifically what is the percentage of the performance of Strategy that can be attributed to those three factors. And so you can look at it over certain periods. That's interesting. But the main conclusion of Tobam is that a Bitcoin treasury company can outperform Bitcoin with unchanged premiums. And that's extremely important because 99% of traditional investors think that the only capacity of the company is through the premium increase, and it's not true. The capacity is based on the BTC yield capacity of the company, which is affected by the other factors, of course, but it's really a matter of the financial engineering of the company to issue financial instruments in accretive ways, and different financial instruments depending on different market conditions to optimize the BTC premium, to optimize the BTC yield, and to optimize the fastness of the Bitcoin accumulation in accretive way for the shareholder.
Excellent. Talking about the corporations, you recently had a presentation in Bitcoin for Corporations. What advice would you give to other CEOs considering a Bitcoin treasury strategy, and what pitfalls should they avoid?
Well, I think that there are three things that I would say. The first one is to allocate all of the long-term capital to Bitcoin specifically. And when I say long-term, I say because you potentially, as an operational business, you don't want to be in difficulties for your normal treasury operations. The second one would be in this order. The first one would be to only focus on Bitcoin and to just do Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Second one would be to allocate all of the long-term capital to Bitcoin. And the third one would be to focus on the balance sheet side exclusively on increasing Bitcoin per share over time. And of course, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't operate day to day and so on, but on a long-term strategy, that should be the right focus. And it doesn't mean that you have to stop your operations. I mean, continue your operations, it's totally fine, but you need to have a dedicated person, a dedicated team that fully focuses on BTC yield for the balance sheet. And that should be the real focus of the strategic investors of the board, to be fully aligned on this.
Excellent. Do you see or do you realize that you are making history? That your case and Sailor case and MetaPlanet are going to be studied in the future in the economy books?
Well, we have a lot of execution to do before talking about history. I think that Michael Saylor has really done history. I think that his capacity to take bold decisions in a thoughtful and constructive way with the different stakeholders and to communicate as well as he's done consistently over the years, and to show the example with such ethics and such commitment to the Bitcoin community is extremely exemplary. And I cannot be thankful enough to Michael for the work that he's done and the work that he's doing, and his team and Metaplanet's team and all of the Bitcoin OGs in the world. I think that's really building on the shoulders of giants, and I'm really honored to be able to make some contribution at a certain level. But I think that the important is the journey, and I think that the result, we will see it over the years, but we still have a lot of things to execute to really talk about history. And so let's have this discussion in 10 to 20 years and look back at what we've done. I think that it's true that you have to realize that you have the freedom, and you have the freedom to do things. And if you think that a specific model, a specific business model, a specific financial model is the best one, you should do it, and you shouldn't wait. On the other side, you should take note of what others have done and what have worked, and what is the best strategy rewarded by investors. And I think that's the strategy playbook. And yeah, I think that by focusing on the right playbook, you can do amazing things. And then as you go, you of course need to adapt to your local circumstances, and that's what we've done with the BTC denominated convertible bond, which was the first worldwide of its kind for a Bitcoin treasury company. But that comes with the doing, and you need to be hands-on and focused on the project. And I think that the beauty of Bitcoin is that, I mean, you meet Bitcoiners and everyone is working for Bitcoin. We are working on the same mission. And the good thing is that time is working for us, because you have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Time is working for you. If you don't need to do something, if you don't have to do something, if the market conditions are not right to do something, well, you can do nothing as well. And the time will work for you. And that's extremely important. I mean, strategy, and Michael has said that many times, I mean, action is sometimes overvalued. I mean, sometimes you have to stick to the playbook, and if the market conditions are not the right ones, you have sometimes to wait for the right market conditions. You have to adapt, and you have to move fast, but not at all costs. And this not at all costs is materialized by the BTC per share increase over time. And so any Bitcoin treasury company, and I think any company in the world over the next 5 to 10 years, will need to report on their BTC yield that they generate. And I think that's the ultimate measure of performance. And in terms of making history, I think that this metric of Bitcoin per share will really make a huge impact in the financial world. Yes.
I think I agree what you say about Michael Saylor. He's a guy who has done a lot. And we are sometimes the ultra maxis, these people that say Bitcoin is for the people, Bitcoin is not for corporations, it's not made to make the richer, and they criticize Saylor. But I think that the contribution that he has made to the Bitcoin community with explaining what Bitcoin is, doing the Bitcoin strategy, and trying and putting his plan transparent to everyone to execute is amazing. So we are arriving to the last part of the conversation, and I want to talk a little bit more about Bitcoin, not the blockchain group, because you told everything. You publicly state that Bitcoin will become the world's reserve of value. What macroeconomic trends or technological developments do you see driving this shift?
So I will really have to go in 3 minutes because I have an appointment just at the next hour. But to be extremely concise, uh, Bitcoin is the best performing asset over the last 15 years. Bitcoin has seen the rise of the most successful ETF of all history. And Bitcoin is the only asset that the United States government does not want to sell and plans to accumulate. On top of it, and back when I was at Accenture, I used to work with all of those systemic banks, and we could already see 1 year ago that 90% of systemic banks in Europe and America were already opening access to Bitcoin, and that about 5% of publicly listed companies were considering Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. And so this is accelerating a lot this year. This year is the year of corporate adoption of Bitcoin, and it's the right time to adopt Bitcoin. And Bitcoin over the next 5 to 10 years will reach mainstream adoption. You could argue that we are already at a tipping point where you reach those 15 to 20% of global adoption of a specific technology. And after those tipping points, you get to really extremely fast mainstream adoption. And you've seen that with the internet, and Bitcoin is following the adoption of the internet curve, and it's an S curve, and it's extremely powerful. And so by adopting Bitcoin as an individual, as a company, as a government, you are putting yourself on the right side of history, as you were saying, because Bitcoin has only 21 million Bitcoin. It's a fixed supply, and the world is full of fiat currencies with unlimited supply. And Bitcoin in these conditions will gradually, but then suddenly, become the world reserve of value. And that's a 400 trillion use case, as Michael usually says. And that means that Bitcoin over a long period, maybe 10 to 20 years, is going to 5 to 10 million US dollar a coin. And at this point in 20 years, the USD price doesn't even matter, you know. For us, it doesn't matter already. We measure the world in Bitcoin. We are on a Bitcoin standard, and we use the traditional financial system levers to accelerate our Bitcoin accumulation in ways that we have the capacity and the opportunity, if we execute our plan and if we follow the right steps of Metaplanet and strategy, to become Europe's largest publicly traded corporation, as illustrated in our 8-year plan that we published 2 weeks ago. So that's the opportunity, and I would encourage anyone to learn more, of course, about Bitcoin, about strategy, about Metaplanet, and about ALTBG, the blockchain group, the European leader for Bitcoin Treasury Company. Thank you so much.
Let me ask you the last question that we do in our show, that is signature. If you have a chance to meet Satoshi Nakamoto, what would you ask him or her?
Oh, that's an amazing question. I would ask him what's his next project. I'm pretty sure it would be a Bitcoin Treasury Company.
Excellent. Alexandre, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure. And anything else you want to add, and how people can contact you?
Yeah, I think anyone, please feel free to tag me on X, ask me any questions. We intend to do more X spaces and interactions with our investors and with our community members. There are X communities, Discord communities that have been created by community members. And so it's really amazing to see. I thank you all for the contributions. And I look forward to discussing with you on X and other platforms. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for everyone who is on the other side. This episode will be in X, will be in YouTube. Go and see it because it was amazing. Thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone who is on the other side. See you in the next episode of our podcast. Stay humble, stack sats, and remember, we are all Satoshi.
Exactly.